it's me, Alternate Forum. That's my name, and we're rebooting the series. Let's talk about the lighting in video games. This is still called Video About Movie Follow-Ups Part 2, but it's going to be about video games. And also, it turns out the entire first video was a dream. And I'm actually a street performer who takes pictures with tourists on Sunset Boulevard, and I live in Hollywood. Timmy died on his way to his home planet, and this is the video now. It's me. I'm here. Deal with it. I don't even like movies.
Okay. Where were we? Looking at you, Bat Tumbler, Godzilla, and the teenage... Alright, going bigger and making huge, unnecessary changes. Or little ones. Yeah. Like intertextuality. Intertextuality is kind of just this beautiful thing that happens when there's individual works where the text in one gives meaning to the text in another. Sometimes it's fun, like when E.T. recognized the Yoda costume as something from his home. Or it can be kinda nightmarish, like when E.T. and his pals showed up in the Galactic Senate in Phantom Menace. This is a superpower that can be used for good or for evil. And that's when it becomes meaningless intertextuality. So here's a little story. One time, I didn't find all the Easter eggs in an Easter egg hunt, but 2 weeks later, it really started to stink in my room, and the egg just cracked open and this brownish yellow substance leaked out. I'm just saying there's Easter eggs, like seeing Alfred Hitchcock on the back of a newspaper in Lifeboat, and then there's rotten eggs, like Ponda Baba showing up in a city that's immediately destroyed in Rogue One, just days before he's making weird noises at Luke on a completely different planet. That's a bad egg. These things can work, but they're usually placed in there to a point of annoyance. For example, I still don't understand why this particular callback was made for the Matrix trilogy.
There are some things in this world, Captain Niobe, that will never change.
Niobe.
Some things do change. You're a hell of a pilot.
Some things in this world never change.
What?
But some things do.
What does that mean? But then this particular callback in Rise of Skywalker, of all things, is actually incredibly effective.
I love you.
I know.
Dad. I know.
Until you realize that Han Solo even being there makes absolutely no sense, and you don't even know if he's a ghost or a vision or just a fake out, any of which totally negates the depth of this callback. Because if that's not really him, then why is he saying this thing that's supposed to be deep? Or how about when Spock died in Wrath of Khan and said the goddamn sweetest, most heartfelt words to his friend of 30 years and 80 live-action adventures?
I have been, and always shall be, your friend.
And then he just says it again in Star Trek 09.
I have been, and always shall be, your friend.
And if you love Star Trek, you really feel this right in the gut, but it makes absolutely no sense whatever. Why would you say this to the teenage version of your best friend when you just traveled into the past? Meaningless intertextuality, kids. It's all over the place. It's usually just there for the audience, you know, because Kylo, he doesn't know that this moment happened. Kirk has never even heard Spock say this before. And yeah, obviously nobody in the room knew who Khan was when Benedict Cumberbatch said this.
My name is Khan.
Khan, nothing else.
Now, credit where it's due, this moment in the Avengers is priceless.
Possible gamma sickness.
The gamma pulse came from the amygdala. We still don't know which is more toxic, the gamma or your blood.
It is too dangerous. It cannot be controlled.
It's radiation. Nothing harmful. Low levels of gamma radiation.
That can be harmful.
The Avengers is probably the best Hulk movie that we've ever gotten, just thanks to intertextuality, and that's why these little things matter. Callbacks can have a lot of weight to them when they're done right over the span of several films, or it can be a cheap gut punch for a pointless attempt at depth. Because when you pay attention and invest in the storyline, the little things can be just as strong as the big moments. That's why these little fixes are so annoying. Much like the prologue cleanup, but more egregious and they can happen anywhere in the story, is something like the retcon. This is short for retroactive continuity. This is not what happens when Nick Fury names the Avengers Initiative after Carol Danvers' flight name. We never had a hint of where he came up with that name. This is just a prequel filling in the blanks. But if Nick Fury heavily implies that he lost his eye due to trusting the wrong person, and that mistake still haunts him to this day.
Soldiers trust each other. That's what makes it an army. Not a bunch of guys running around shooting guns.
Last time I trusted someone, I lost an eye.
Yes, it's a shitty retcon to say it was just a silly accident with a cat. Because really, if a normal cat that wasn't even a cosmic horror monster scratched my eye, I would be more worried than Nick was right here. But anyway, that's the thing retcons do. They take advantage of ambiguity. Sometimes it feels like an oversight, with Princess Leia, for example, saying that she knew her mom in Return of the Jedi.
She was very beautiful, kind, but sad.
But then, nope, she just dies giving birth. And it's not just in prequels. In Men in Black 3, it turns out that Kay was watching Jay the whole time. The first film never said this wasn't the case. Or in Spectre, same kind of thing. Everything that ever happened to James Bond in all 3 films was Blofeld the whole time. Retcons are just a dirty trick to make serious changes to important items or characters to facilitate more story. There was another criminal there the night that Uncle Ben was killed.
We were wrong. What? Turns out Mr. Carradine was only an accomplice. The actual killer is still at large.
Man, oh man, do the movies love to void out a character's death as a retcon. What do we want to call this? The Lazarus Effect, maybe. Is that a good name for it? What do you call it when somebody comes back to life? I can't remember. Character brought back to life. Resurrection. There we go. Character resurrection. You've seen it before and you will see it again. Agent Coulson, Captain Barbosa, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers again, Freddy a bunch of times. Yeah, Spock, and let's not forget,
somehow Palpatine returned.
I mean, Ripley got split in half by an alien and dumped into hot magma, and then she's just there again in the next movie. Hey, look, shish kebab Trinity and the blinded, beaten Neo. They're back too, doesn't matter how. And Highlander 2, The Quickening, I don't even know if this I can't talk about this movie, it's too fucking confusing. I don't know, that movie might have everything wrong with it. Then there's the opposite problem of bringing back a character, just trying to get rid of him. Otherwise known as the off-screen death. Always so satisfying to see. Aliens ends on Ripley escaping with a little girl and a soldier friend who both just die before the next movie starts up. And then in The Matrix, Tank miraculously survives his lightning gun wound at the end of the film, just to be replaced by Link due to his off-screen death because the filmmakers apparently didn't like him very much. Couldn't get Linda Hamilton back for T3? She died of cancer, I guess? Sometimes you need that role to be filled so you don't just kill off the character or recast them, you kinda just decast them. In Godfather 2 and Star Trek 6 Undiscovered Country, there is this betrayal by a character introduced within those 2 movies. But they were originally intended to be characters who had been there all along in previous films, and they just had to replace the character instead of simply recasting it. And then, yes, of course, we have the recasting issue. Back in The Matrix again, Gloria Foster, who played the Oracle, died during filming and was recast with this lazy-ass excuse for a change.
What happened? I made a choice, and that choice cost me more than I wanted it to.
Michael Gough as Alfred was legit the only actor who stuck around for all 4 of the 90s Batman movies. Michael Keaton got turned into Val Kilmer, Kilmer got turned into Clooney. Edward Norton was apparently too much of a pretentious asshole to be in the MCU, so he gets replaced with Mark Ruffalo. Poor Richard Harris died after only 2 Harry Potter movies, reminding filmmakers everywhere to not cast an 80-year-old man for your 8-film franchise. Hey, Hannibal's popular again. We gotta make a movie called Hannibal. Clarice doesn't matter anymore. We can't wait for Jodie Foster to be available. Just replace her with Julianne Moore. Bad Hollywood. Bad boy. Shame on you. Peter Cushing has been dead for over 20 years. Just replace him with a CGI nightmare in Rogue One. Can't get Crispin Glover back for your Back to the Future sequel? Just put an actor in some old guy makeup and hang him upside down and get sued? Bad Hollywood. You did it again. Bad. Recasting and decasting, the retcons, intertextual husks, rotten eggs, these are some of the worst sins of the franchise follow-ups. But something I don't think gets nearly enough grief for rearing its ugly head is meta bullshit and deconstructing your own franchise. So, Brightburn is this movie that follows the origin story of Superman so closely, it might as well be Superman. But it isn't. It's a deconstruction of the Superman story, and it asks, what if Superman was a twisted, evil psychopath? This isn't to say that Superman can't be turned evil in a storyline, but changing the fundamentals of a character just so you can be deconstructive or meta to address the fans, that's not storytelling, it's editorializing. Just go write an article. But oh, making Superman angry is nothing compared to the bashing that the Disney princesses get in recent films.
Do animals talk to you? No. Were you poisoned? No. Cursed? No. Kidnapped or enslaved? No. Are you guys okay? Should I call the police?
They do this with the recasting sometimes, like in Iron Man 2 and The Mummy 3.
Look, it's me. I'm here to deal with it. Let's move on.
Honestly, I can say she's a completely different person.
Fine, you're breaking the fourth wall, you're getting it out of the way, but just shut up. Stop it. Nothing takes you out of a movie like having the characters talk directly to you and address your reviews on YouTube videos right there in the movie. And I'm not talking about Deadpool breaking the fourth wall, that's part of the experience. I'm talking about this underhanded way of talking to the audience. Gremlins 2 is full of references to the real-world reaction to the first film.
I look at him, you know what I see?
What's that, sir?
Dolls with suction cups staring out car windows.
And this bullshit in Skyfall?
Were you expecting an exploding pen? We don't really go in for that anymore.
Yes! Yes, that's what we were expecting. And then in the first X-Men movie.
What do you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Yes! Even in one of my favorite all-time sequels, I still see these guys responding to fan backlash, and this was way before people could bitch about it on Twitter.
Security? Who let Vicky Vale into the Batcave? I'm sitting there working, and I turn around, there she is. Oh, hi, Vic. Come on in.
This unsubtle nod to the audience, addressing criticisms right in the movie, is, again, nothing new. In Son of Frankenstein, the third of the Boris Karloff trilogy, has Dr. Frankenstein making the point that people still don't get to this day, that Frankenstein's the doctor's name and not the monster's name.
His name has become synonymous with horror and monsters. Why, 9 out of 10 people call that misshapen creature of my father's experiments.
And then you got Rian Johnson's nearly 3-hour essay on how the Jedi are stupid, and Star Wars isn't complex enough.
Skywalker. The Sith. The Jedi. The Rebels. Let it all die.
Shut up. Just shut up. Alright, because here's the deal. Those homage films that I mentioned earlier, Spaceballs comments on Star Wars merchandising, and the Batman fan films show us what happens when Batman meets up with the Predator or gets in some kind of insane situation that's never going to happen in the films. This is okay in the homage film, because the homage and parody films, they're kind of like the dark underbelly of the franchise where deconstruction and meta humor is appropriate. Some people like it in their movies, but that's because we all like a little postmodern deconstruction of things that we love. But there's always going to be fans who don't appreciate being lectured in an out-of-character way by the movie they came to escape into.
I think what? I'm gonna walk out with a laser sword and face down the whole First Order?
No, really, fuck you. Okay. Alternate Form has been rambling for a while, and it may seem like I got no point here, but I do. Franchises, they're not going anywhere, and the standalone films have become the exception in Hollywood. They're practically extinct. So that means that we gotta get better at writing these follow-ups. We gotta stop making the same mistakes that have been recurring since the 1920s for nearly the entire 100-year history of cinema. It's time to grow up. It's time to do better. Now, obviously, some of these tropes, they work out and others do not. And this is pretty subjective. A lot of people like the things that I've trashed in this video, and that's your opinion, and you can like whatever you want. I like some stuff and you hate some stuff, that's fine. But what isn't up for debate, what isn't objective, is that when a fan base gets split, that's a bad thing. Historically, everybody has loved The Empire Strikes Back. And like I said in my first video, it still gets boasted as the best sequel in the franchise. The Last Jedi? It was deconstructive, dropped the standard tropes, and just said, deal with this new version. It's really nothing more than the shitty retcons and retreads and character swaps that were forced on filmmakers before, but then someone decides to just do it on purpose. And they call that subverting expectations. I wish that was like a dirty word at this point, but they just say it like they're proud of themselves. And even though The Last Jedi is the movie that kind of made this term into a tasteless expletive, they did this in a big way in Iron Man 3 by making the Mandarin a bumbling idiot and giving his name to another character.
I am the Mandarin!
No, you're not!
You should use your full name.
No, you shouldn't! The fact that Star Wars is so full of these cancerous tumors that are spreading through the franchise and ruining it, just due to different filmmakers doing their own take, this is why the fan base is one of the most toxic and angry groups you'll ever find in fandom.
I don't like the movie. I am free to say what I like to say, and I don't feel I have to uphold some certain belief or political system.
And side note, as a longtime fan of the Legend of Zelda game series, the retcons and subversions of expectations that they're doing in those video games now is why a traditionally very chilled out fan base is slowly getting more and more aggressive and split and toxic.
Is this like a generational thing where like the older classic Zelda fans, of which I am one, but I don't associate with this?
So thanks guys, Link doesn't have a hat anymore and he wears a blue shirt. Anytime someone decides to just purposely drop the ball on their follow-up, they excuse it by saying it was impossible to please everyone. But take a look at something simple like Batman Returns. It's just a sequel. It didn't subvert expectations, it just met them. Batman's back, here's some of his villains. We all knew it was gonna be that kind of movie, and that's exactly what it was. Okay, fine, maybe you don't want to just meet fan expectations, so you subvert them? Do you know how easy that is? Back to the Future 2, we expect to see Doc and Marty go to the future, have a funny time-traveling adventure and save the day. We all expect that and we all know it. Subverting that takes the same creativity as meeting those expectations. They want Doc and Marty to time travel, so don't do that. Okay. Expectations subverted. My point is, going bigger, retreading, subverting expectations, it's nothing more than one-step creativity. Here's what's expected, now let's go one step in this direction, and then we've exhausted all our creative energy. You babies. But you know what? They didn't just travel to the future. They went back in time and revisited familiar scenes from a new perspective without undoing the satisfying ending of the previous film.
I gotta go! I got one chance! My old man's about to deck Biff!
They did more than we expected, and not only was everyone happy, we've stayed happy for 30-something years. Same with The Empire Strikes Back and The Dark Knight. They did not meet expectations, and they didn't subvert our expectations, they exceeded our expectations.
Whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.
And you want to know why we rarely see that in these follow-ups? Because it's hard to do. It's not impossible, it's not subjective, and it's not even luck. Just like I said in my first video about story and character and morals, if you can hang in there and do it well, then it's an objective truth that it's done well, and you can plan, write, and work your ass off to make sure that the follow-up, remake, prequel, sequel, remake, rip-off, fan film, whatever it is, you can work your ass off and make sure that it exceeds the expectations that fans have. Because no follow-up will ever be made in a bubble. They don't have to stand on their own because they can't. And that's because the filmmakers do not work and the audience does not engage without those other films existing. The first Avengers movie has a decent amount of character arc in it for itself. But honestly, if you hadn't seen the first movies in that franchise, you really don't get their motivations here. That's because The Avengers is like the fifth act in a very long play. It doesn't need to stand on its own because it can't stand on its own. If you look at every failed or fan base splitting entry in a franchise, just stop and think of it as a chapter in a book, and you'll quickly see why it doesn't work. Curse of the Black Pearl ends with Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann happily in love. The next film begins with their wedding. This works because it's the next logical place for them to be in the story. There isn't a Star Wars fan on the planet who would never be able to accept a salty hermit Luke Skywalker. But when we last saw him in the franchise, or in the previous chapter of this book, he was poised to start a new line of Jedi and put the Force back in balance. He was celebrating with his friends and his newly found sister and family. So you gotta start the next chapter with the logical next place for him. An old master who is thriving, and then you can tear him down. These stupid off-screen deaths and ruined relationships happening between one chapter and the next, and then forcing us to like new characters coming out of nowhere, it's disorienting, and frankly, it's lazy and shitty, and it just brings this line to mind every time I see it.
He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodie car!
Now, we've gone over a lot of different ways that filmmakers take their stab at the follow-up, but none of that really matters, because you only have 3 ways to deal with a follow-up entry in a franchise. With every small decision, and with your prologue that connects it to the previous entry, and with your entire plot overall, 3 options. Every follow-up in history does one of these 3 things, on a small scale or on a large scale. Number 1, double down. Repeat everything. Just take what worked in the previous movie and do it again. Number 2, you can contradict. Contradict the morals of the story. Change the genre. Retcon the hell out of the thing. Say to the world that your vision of this movie is the only thing that's important and all the fans can fuck off. Number 3, expand. Take what has been established, put the characters in new situations with the growth that they achieved in the previous film, and then you can expand the world if it's a sci-fi fantasy, or just expand the story if it's something more grounded. Pick up where we left off, like you would in the chapter of a book. Even if it's got a huge time skip, don't just do that time skip and say a bunch of important things happened and all that stuff happened in the meantime. Pick up where we left off and expand. If you're a filmmaker, whether you're just making a point, telling a story, or doing a character piece, you are taking the audience on a journey. So keep them on that journey if you're the driver. Our life in this moment, our imaginations, our hopes and dreams as an audience are in your hands. So don't just drop your audience off at the next stop and pick them up somewhere else. Because a lack of continuity takes you out of the movie. You wouldn't want continuity errors in your book, and you wouldn't want continuity errors in your self-contained movie. And we don't want to see them in our franchising, because continuity is the reward for paying attention. Shitty retcons and contradictions might seem like a good idea at the time, but they will end up serving as a punishment to anybody who's paying attention. And just to round this out with one more possibly controversial point, once a movie is out there in the world, being loved by fans, it no longer belongs just to the filmmaker. It is something that is now shared with the world. That isn't to say George Lucas didn't still own Star Wars when he decided to make the prequels, but let's just say the fans become creative shareholders in the heart of a franchise. That's it, I'm done.